I didn't want to become this. I fought against it with everything I had. But given what's happened, now I see it was inevitable. I could have kept resisting, denying the truth of who I am. But I couldn't bear it anymore. I've embraced it. Become what I never wanted to be. Cold. Unforgiving. Unrelenting. A king whose heart is made of ice. Welcome to my court. So many elements you've braved to ascend my frozen mountain. I'm glad you've come. As you read in my letter, the need is dire. I'm afraid I don't have much time. Each day that passes, I feel less and less myself, and I fear that soon I shall be lost entirely. But with your gifts, perhaps we may yet determine what is to be done, to see if there is yet any hope for me. So that you may understand the events that brought us here, I shall tell you my story. It's not a happy story, I'm afraid. Don't you know it already? An evil, wretched king who rules a once green land, its verdant fields buried beneath the tortured winter of his power. I know what they say about me. But if you'd have the truth of it, I shall tell you. I was a prince, the heir to a beautiful kingdom, ruled by my father and mother, the king and queen. When I came of age, I set out to learn all that I could of the world, seeking adventure, my heart open and free, full of joy and hope. The soaring ambition of my heart was naive to the heartbreak and betrayal before me. I have not become what I dreamed of. I have failed, and I am broken. It all began when I met a charming, beautiful, genius witch. When I left my home, I traveled first to Illyria, a nearby kingdom filled with miles upon miles of enchanted forest. As I wandered through, I saw her gathering mushrooms and approached. The moment our eyes met, I felt our minds meet and blend together. She was the first person I'd ever met who understood my sensitivity and my curiosity about love. For 3 years, we courted. She understood my quest to find magic in the world, to see if it's all as enchanted as the storybooks say. She taught me how to feel the currents of life that connect all things, to honor the seasons, to celebrate the rotations of the stars and the moon. She loved me, truly and deeply. And though in a dark part of my mind I knew that I was under her spell, I loved her too. As the years passed, I began to feel the edges of the spell she had cast on me. She tied me to her, preventing me from leaving a narrow section of the wood without feeling great pain. I had never been in love before. I thought perhaps this was natural. I allowed her to take tiny pieces of me, to chip away at my sense of self, until I began to wake up at night, feeling the shadows of the dead gathering around me. I began to look closer at the room we shared, and saw not a lover's Arcadia, but a prison. She asked me to marry her. I said no, and that night I dreamed that the clammy hands of the dead had found me at last, touching my face and caressing my skin. I screamed, and woke to find myself face to face with the witch, her eyes wild and hungry. When the sun rose, she was nowhere to be found. As I packed a bag to leave, I found a letter from her addressed to me. In it, she professed her undying love and begged me not to leave her, not to sacrifice the beautiful life we had together. I was gone before she had a chance to come back, or a chance to protest. As the door closed behind me, I felt the binding spell break and the pain lift. I found that I could breathe again, and the lightness I felt sped me down the forest path. But as I fled, I was riddled with grief and remorse. I wish I'd had the courage to talk to her, that I hadn't just vanished without a word. It was cowardly and didn't honor the love we shared. But I was afraid she'd weave her spell around me again. I gave myself 1,000 excuses why it was easier to just disappear. The fact is, it was easier for me, even if it broke her heart. I doubt she's ever forgiven me. I haven't forgiven myself. Over the weeks that followed, I thought, maybe it's better to be cold and avoid love altogether. When I emerged from the enchanted wood, I made my way to a great city. There I found a group of traveling minstrels, and after listening to them perform in a pub for a few nights, I figured I had nothing to lose, and asked to join their ranks. They accepted, and I was promptly dressed in troubadour's clothes and whisked from city to city, playing, singing, drinking, and creating all kinds of trouble with my new friends. It wasn't long before I fell deeply in love with one of them. I was infatuated with him, captivated by his joy and charisma. I told my closest friend in the group, another singer of remarkable skill, everything, every intimate detail of my love for this man. In each city and town, I told him of every interaction, every glance, every tantalizing moment of tension. He listened, attentively and kindly, graciously indulging me for hours on end. We carried on this way for over a year. Every day, week, and month that passed, my desire grew stronger. It became an all-consuming obsession, and I loved it. Then one day, back in the city where I met the group, I had a night of excessive debauchery. I staggered my way to my beloved's dwelling, determined to finally confess my feelings for him. I let myself in, found my way to his room, and opened the door to discover him in the throes of passion with the dear friend to whom I had told all my secrets. It was the first time I experienced the frigid chill of betrayal. In the days that followed, I learned that they had been together the entire year that I had entrusted my feelings to my friend. The man had listened to my every desire, every explicit detail, all while the two of them spent many nights together. Betrayal is a pain that goes deeper than nearly anything else I've experienced. It kills all feeling and undermines even the strongest bonds of trust. Sometimes, the damage can be repaired. After my passion cooled, I spoke vulnerably to the man with whom I had been in love, and through his kindness and grace, we've been great friends ever since. But the knave who betrayed my trust, we've rarely spoken since. And I don't care to, even if he has undergone great change. I wish him well, but I was so chilled by what occurred that my capacity for forgiveness died. I left the minstrels with pain in my heart and traveled on. Better, I thought, to remove myself from the situation entirely before my resolve could melt. It was then that I met the most beautiful woman I have ever known. She was tall, strong, kind. The type of woman men go to war over. I joined a dance company in the city under a false name, wanting to learn to make my body sing, like the men and women of the traveling shows. The dance master paired me with her, and from the moment I saw her, I knew she would be my greatest friend. We spent hours upon hours together, dancing, cooking, drinking, and reveling in our youth. It wasn't long before I felt this kinship blossom into something more. Dance of any kind is intimate, and I couldn't say I was surprised at myself. For what man could resist that smile, that laugh, and the light behind her eyes? I began to make small, tentative advances. She didn't seem to notice, and I summoned up the courage to make a larger gesture. But just before I was about to make my pronouncement, she came bursting into our rehearsal hall in a glow of sunshine. With happiness beaming from her, she announced that she had found a wonderful man, bearded and strong, and that she was finally happy. And then she disappeared. She stopped coming to our nightly revels, and within weeks, she had stopped dancing with us altogether. I tried everything I could think of to reach her. I sent letters, asked her other friends if they had heard from her, even contacted her family, though I stopped short of going to her residence unannounced. Her family and other friends assured me that she was doing well, and eventually told me that she had moved out of the city. I grieved what might have been, not only my love for her, but for the friendship we shared. I tried a few times to find her, to no avail. Many years later, I received a letter from her, saying that she had broken free of the man. She said that she was in the process of finding her life again. The ink of the letter was smudged from where her tears had fallen. I still have that letter, clinging to some small hope that one day I will see my dear friend again. Perhaps it would be better not to feel it all than to love so deeply and lose so much. I left the dance company and journeyed on again. I walked and walked over mountain and hill until I found a beautiful seaside town, at the center of which stood a grand tower. Intrigued, I inquired what this tower might be for, or who might live there. The townspeople told me that long ago, a foreign noble had come to the seaside town seeking to escape his own country. He had a great deal of gold, and paid the townspeople well to help him construct the tower, inside of which he had now dwelled for many years. When the tower was finished, he had shut himself inside, and no one had seen him since. Not even the local men who delivered food to the small door which was the only means of entry. I decided to watch the tower and see if I might meet this reclusive noble. I watched the local men deliver a basket of fresh produce to his door that night. I kept my vigil for hours, until suddenly the door opened just wide enough for a hand to reach out and pull the food inside. Rather than risk the noble becoming frightened by a direct visit, the next day I asked the men to deliver a note with his food. If, it read, he would care to meet a prince from another land, might he leave the door ajar that night so that I might enter? The sun set, the stars appeared, and after the hand once again reached out to take the basket inside, the door remained open. I approached and entered. There before me stood a handsome man, nearly as tall as I, with a worried look on his face. "Come up then," he said, and led me to the center of the tower. There we came to a great elevator, upon which we ascended. At the top was a cozy, well-appointed room, with windows that looked out over the town and the sea. We sat, and over tea he told me his tale. He was at heart, he said, a misanthropist, and did not care for people at all. He had built this tower to escape the frustrations of life among people, and was as content as he had ever been. I could tell that he meant it. Living in this tower, the one thing he missed was physical relations. And so I spent the night to remind him. I stayed in the tower for many days. The noble and I talked for hours on end, and our relationship grew. I became quite fond of him, and even loved him. We could, I thought, balance each other well, and my parents would be pleased at a partnership with a noble from another land. And so I brought it up to him. Though I could not live in the tower as he did, would he be interested in continuing our relationship? With great sadness in his eyes, he told me that he was happier alone, and though he had tried to love me, he didn't. If it couldn't work with you, he said, it won't work with anyone. And he sent me down in that great elevator. He still lives there. He even writes me sometimes, from his high tower to my frozen castle. Perhaps he was right all along. Some part of me will always feel the disappointment of offering myself and feeling that I wasn't enough, wasn't right. I imagine that as I left, he sighed with relief as he closed the tower door behind me. With heavy steps, I made my way to the docks to board a ship. Better to sail away to uncharted, frosty parts of the sea, I thought, than to stay in that town, haunted by the towering reminder of what I could never have. I boarded the first ship I could find, which was captained by an immensely charismatic man. He was a merchant and sailed his ship to dozens of ports, trading goods and meeting new people. I wanted to learn from him and told him that I would stay and work until I felt ready to set out on my own again. He agreed, and for a year I sailed with him, learning the ways of trade and commerce. We became good friends, often debating politics, philosophy, and the most effective methods of seduction, late into the night. We were never physically intimate, nor did we have any desire to be, but we were as close as friends could be. Before long, I became his first mate. We made money. Lots of it. Our skills complemented each other, and together we met and traded with people on all sides of the sea. We enjoyed the challenge and the joy of working together. But after a time, I was ready to move on, to set out on a different journey. I told the captain I would like to disembark at the next port, and to my surprise, his demeanor turned cold and angry. Why, he asked, would you abandon me? Business is better than ever. You would waste my hard work training you. I tried to reason with him, to remind him that from the first day we met, we had agreed that this day would come. But he wouldn't hear it. He flew into a rage, destroying his cabin and raising alarm among the crew. Seeing that he could not be reasoned with, I retreated to my cabin and locked the door. The next morning, I awoke to an angry knock. "We're here," the captain said. I took my belongings and made for the upper deck. The entire crew had gathered, their eyes downcast. Off the starboard side of the ship was an island I had never seen nor heard of. "The next port, you said," the captain sneered. "Here's the next port. Off you go, if you're so eager to leave." I saw a murderous glint in his eye and decided to take my chances with the island. As I watched the ship sail away, I felt the now familiar chill of cold fury, of a grudge newly formed. I vowed then and there that I would use all he had taught me to become a greater merchant than he had ever dreamed. Better to seek revenge through frozen hatred than to feel myself the victim of another man. Though it took me many months, I eventually found my way to my mother's summer castle, the very castle in which you now stand. It was a place she used for refuge and said would one day be mine, though I doubt she anticipated the circumstances. I used the skills the merchant had taught me to make the surrounding town prosper. People flocked to it, and as the town grew, I began to require aid and advisors. I put out a call for any who would like a position helping to manage and steward what was now a small kingdom of my own. I took on many, but the most exciting and alluring of them was the magician. As an audition, he gave a performance before the entire court. He was a master of illusion and created animals and fantastical creatures made of light to swim, fly, and gallop about the Great Hall. He was dazzling, a first-rate talent, shining with charm and charisma. I loved him on sight. He joined my court and was beloved by all. He seemed to possess some kind of psychic ability, or perhaps it was simply heightened empathy and sensitivity that made him able to connect with almost anyone. My favorite thing about him, apart from his ease and humor, was the way he saw past all the finery, all the manners of court, into who I truly was. He saw not the prince on a throne, but the man who had been unknowingly bespelled, traveled with vagrant singers, danced elegantly in the finest halls, and been soaked to the skin in sea brine. He saw what I had always longed for someone to see. And so I asked him to spend more time together. He managed to fit me in among all his other appointments, so beloved was he, and I began to court him. I sent flowers to his room and brought him gifts. I invited him to extravagant banquets and took him for long walks in the palace gardens. And through it all, he seemed thoroughly and completely unimpressed. I confess his unaffected response made me try all the harder to win his heart. Perhaps that was my undoing. He came to my bed many times. The connection between us lit me ablaze, and the passion I felt was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I yearned for him, desired him so much that I surprised even myself. And then, one day, he vanished. He left a note telling me it was for my own good, and perhaps one day we could be friends again. He accused me of trying to buy his love, of making gross and obscenely grand gestures that he said were not love but manipulation. I wept alone for days, aghast, wondering how the love I felt, how my attempts at connection could be interpreted this way. Was I truly a monster? A man who used his position and power for sex, who believed he had good intentions but was truly a man that people feared and loathed. It was then that I felt something irrevocable occur. The doors of my heart began to close. I shut myself off from the world, from my subjects. I fell into despair. Perhaps, like the noble in the tower, I was better off alone, forever. As time went on, I found meaning in work and continued on despite my wounds and weariness. Years passed, and the kingdom continued to prosper. I healed some, though I never trusted quite the same way again. And then one day, as swiftly as he had vanished, the magician reappeared in court. He entered the great hall in precisely the same fashion, beaming sunshine and charisma. He put on his light show, and the figures that danced around the room were even more dazzling than they had been years ago. He approached and threw his arms around me. "I missed you so much, my prince. How have you been?" "Where did you go?" I asked. "To see the world. I've learned so much. I'm sorry for the way I left things. I thought it was for the best. Shall we walk? We went to the gardens, and he told me of his adventures, of the magic he had learned, and the people he had met. He described the sights he'd seen and the food of far-off lands. He was full of joy and life. "Why did you return?" I asked. His face showed confusion. "I wanted to see you. You're such a wonderful person and a mature ruler. I was hoping to stay here a while and perhaps show you all I've learned. I think you'll like it. And, well, if you're not feeling well, I think what I have to show you will improve your mood somewhat." And so the cycle began again. He came into my bed, and we spent night after night exploring each other. He was right. I did find his new techniques satisfying. More meals discussing philosophy and the politics of faraway lands, more celebrations, more walks in the gardens. I looked at him one day and realized that once again, I was fully, deeply in love with him, despite the warning in my heart. He had changed and grown. We both had. Something deep within me knew this was special, and knew that he felt it too. And so one evening, over a mountainous pile of desserts he was gleefully devouring, I told him how I felt. I held back some, not wanting to scare him away, but I was honest and vulnerable, and asked him if he wanted to further develop the relationship. And to my great surprise, to the contradiction of all my expectations, he said, yes. He told me he reciprocated my feelings. My heart soared. Truthfully, I'd expected a non-answer, a dismissal, perhaps even a tirade about how manipulating I was. But no. Softly, with his brown doe eyes, he told me he felt the same way. The love we made that night made even his fireworks seem dim. And when I woke the next morning, he was gone. No note this time. His belongings had vanished. No trace of him remained. It was as if he had never been. The only proof I had of his existence was the jagged rent I felt at the very center of my heart. I didn't search for him. I simply accepted what had happened. I wept, and I knew that I was a fool. I suspect that one day he'll return, but he shall find me much changed and my court transformed. Still I grieve the loss of him, the death of a future I truly believed in. The colder I was, the less it hurt. Better to numb than to feel. But the greatest betrayal of all was yet to come. For all my life, my family has been the cornerstone of my security. While we have never been the wealthiest of the royal families, my father and mother, the king and queen, have always ensured that my brothers and I knew courage, kindness, and responsibility. They are admirable monarchs, well loved by their subjects and all who know them. It came as a great surprise then when my mother urgently requested to come to the castle. Naturally, her room was swiftly made ready, and within only a few days' time she arrived. She was clearly in great distress, and I offered her all the hospitality I could. She walked the gardens and the parapets, her face drawn and troubled. After several days of this, we sat down together, and I asked her what the matter was. "All is not well with your father," she said. "Is it his health?" I asked. "No," she replied. "Financial troubles?" No, she said. "Something with the kingdom, then?" At that, she dissolved into tears and could speak no more. The next day, she seemed wearier than ever, but her face was hard and determined. She announced that she was setting off back home, and off indeed she went. Some weeks passed, and though I was worried, I felt confident that whatever trouble they had encountered, my parents would surely overcome it, as they had many times before. Then I received a message from my mother. The king, she said, had betrayed her. He had been conducting a secret affair with the queen of a neighboring kingdom for months. When my mother confronted him, he had denied it, so she found out the truth through her own sources. Though they had made attempts to repair, she said, it was all too little and too late. Their alliance and their marriage would be dissolved. Until a resolution could be reached, she had retreated to a secret location in the north. As I read her letter, cold shock numbed every vein in my body. I felt strange, quiet, and certain. I looked up and watched my castle transform. Ice, cold and solid, crept up the walls. The ceilings and the floors froze. The gates were shut by icicles like great fangs, and the castle approach was suddenly buried in snow. The letter froze solid in my hands, and deep within I felt my heart stop beating, replaced by crystalline, immovable ice. I felt nothing. No grief. No pain. Only cold, bitter, implacable anger. Something vital, something deep within me had changed. Now I am what you see before you. The Ice King, hard and immovable, merciless, cold, and unforgiving. I am finally free. You know now how I became what I am. Are you repulsed? Do you judge me? Do you pity me? Would you have acted differently in my place? Do you see a man who, despite a blessed life, let disappointments and life's natural challenges corrupt him, steal his warmth and love from him? When I summoned you, I didn't expect you would answer. I thought that perhaps I don't deserve to be saved. But despite my trials, despite the pain and harm I have caused to others, and that I myself have endured, I do not wish to die buried in snow. Somewhere, in the most obstinate corner of my heart, I know that I may yet become the man who has always been my destiny. A generous king, kind and open-hearted to all, from whose heart spins a light that nourishes the land and its people. I will not give up. I wish to heal before bitterness and sorrow consume me. I wish to thaw my heart and return my land to what it once was. I wish to feel the warmth of love again, though I know well the cost. Do you think there is hope? Will you stay?